Hello, jewelry lover. My name is Bella Naiman, and I'm the founder of New York City Jewelry Week. Welcome to this virtual program that's part of NYCJW 24. Our theme for the 7th annual New York City Jewelry Week is Wonder and Wander. This theme reflects the multifaceted nature of jewelry as both art and personal expression. Wander captures the awe-inspiring craftsmanship behind each piece, the dazzling, delicate, and/or bold details that turn your head in admiration. Wander invites you to explore the wonderful and wild creative journeys behind the jewelry. It's not just about the finished piece, it's about the adventure it took to get there. Designers experiment, push boundaries, and play with ideas and materials. And this year, New York City Jewelry participants get to see it all unfold. Every necklace, ring, and bracelet is a passport to a new world where innovation reigns and imagination knows no limits. We hope that these programs take you on that journey, and we're very thankful to eBay for being our sponsor and presenting these programs to you. So sit back and enjoy. And we know this program is now live, but you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. Send us an email, a DM, or say hello on the streets, which is where we do hope to see you next time. Thanks so much. Bye.
Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Bernstein, and I'm moderating today a discussion on signet rings with one fabulous dealer and three amazing designers, all who have some dealings in signet rings. I wanted to just start off with a little tidbit about signet rings, and then I'm going to ask questions to the panel and they're going to answer, and sometimes we're going to jump in and talk to each other, but hopefully you'll get a lot of information from this, and you'll enjoy learning more about signet rings, past and present. So signet rings date back to ancient times, and they've become a mark of personal distinction and individuality. Unlike the more delicate rings of the past, bearing hearts, flowers, cluster designs, the antique signet rings are gutsy statement pieces that can be worn on any finger, like the original owners did. And so it's not surprising that contemporary designers, like the ones you're going to meet today, have picked up on these standout pieces and are reimagining them with their own unique brand of engravings, shapes, sizes, enameling, motifs, and gemstones. So I'm going to start off letting everyone introduce themselves, and then I'll ask some questions. So Diane Richardson, who's a dealer, why don't we start off with you introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
I've been a dealer for almost 40 years. I like all kinds of things, but I've bought and sold a number of signet rings through the years, and they occupy a very fun niche in my inventory. And fun fact, as I was preparing for what I'm going to say today, the very next day I had a customer come in and buy a signet ring. So they are still popular. People do still want them, and they have a very interesting history, which Beth alluded to, and I will discuss further.
Okay, the next I'm seeing on the screen is Gwen. So Gwen, why don't you go next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Gwen Barba. I am a designer based in Los Angeles. My work generally celebrates the beauty of nature and the way beautiful moments in nature can trigger memories and emotions. I do make a lot of my work myself, especially the vitreous glass enameling. And that's kind of what led me to making signet rings, because they're just this like blank canvas that is waiting for a design. And, you know, they have this incredible potential to be so personal and symbolic. So it just was a very natural progression in my work.
Okay, so next I see Kirsty Stone from Retrivai. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about your aesthetic?
Sure. Yes, thank you, Beth, for the introduction. My brand is Retrivai. The name Retrivai comes from the French proverb that means the joy in reconnecting with something from your past. So everything that we do is sort of through the lens of legacy and ideas that I personally want to instill in my children, and I think that, you know, just generally in society. So it's really, you know, about taking something from the past and then passing it forward in general. So I would say that is our general aesthetic.
That's
And
great.
we've been, I suppose, we 8 years now that we've had Retrovi.
Wonderful. The next person I want to introduce is Emily Hirsch from Talion. And I would like you to talk a little bit about your aesthetic. Not, so we'll get into more about the signet rings later, but just your general aesthetic.
Okay, thank you, Beth, for having me. I'm honored to be here. So as Beth said, my jewelry is called Talon, and I've been making it for about 17 years now. It's a lot of symbolic and meaningful pieces that come from my own personal emotions and experiences. And you'll see signets. I have had them since the very beginning, which I'll talk about more later. But they, as everyone has said, they're just such meaningful pieces with such rich history. So I also can't resist working with them. And I'm based in Ojai, California.
That's great. Thank you so much, Emily. Before I get started on the questions, I did want to say that I'm a big collector of signet rings. That is part of my collection of signet rings that you're seeing up on the screen. And it's a mix of intaglios and other seals and pieces from Art Nouveau period. Hardstone and just a real mix. And then also I've had a couple, but I've had one in particular that I commissioned from a designer because Lily of the Valleys mean return to happiness, and to me that is very important to me. It was around the pandemic. And so I thought we all really need a return to happiness. And there's a quote inside that's in Latin that means, if I breathe, I hope, which was another very personal thing for me. So you can personalize modern signet rings, and the rest of what you saw were antique and vintage signet rings. And you can mix all together. So I just wanted to let you know that one of the reasons I'm doing overseeing this panel is because of my own love for signet rings. So now I'll get into the questions. Enough about me. I'll get into the questions. And let me start with Diane. And I just want to ask Diane, once again, her store is called The Gold Happen. Can you speak a little bit about the history of signets, when the first signets came into existence, and then a brief history of how they evolved?
So signets started out just as signets before they were signet rings. And it was a carved cylindrical seal used to convey authenticity in ancient times, as long ago as 33,500 BC in Mesopotamia. And of course, this was a time when very few people could read or write. So they were used to verify the identity of the wearer, as well as to authenticate important documents. Then the ancient Egyptians in around 1800 BC, really, it's a long time ago, attached the seal to a ring. And the pharaohs and important dignitaries wore them as a mark of their rank and a sign of their rank and authority. So originally the seals were carved into softer stones or even ivory. But as time passed, and with the advent of the Bronze Age around 1500 BC, the rings started to be made of metal and came to look more like the rings that we're familiar with today. So the ancient Greeks and later the Romans began to produce really beautiful examples for both the rich and the poor. The Greeks viewed the signet ring as tiny works of art, and they frequently used a natural theme, a theme of nature, and nearly everyone wore one. But in other parts, and they used different stones. They were carved semi-precious and some precious stones, such as chalcedony, onyx, agate, sardonyx, and then they could use sapphires, emeralds, and garnets. And they were eventually set into gold and silver. So the higher the rank of the person, the more precious the metal. And the people of the lower rank or held a lesser position in society wore rings made of iron. So the ancient Greeks and Romans used the seals as amulets to protect them during war. And in fact, you remember Hannibal, the Carthaginian general who crossed the Alps with 37 elephants. You all remember him. He apparently collected the signet rings from the Roman soldiers that he killed. So that showed a proof that they were dead. So signet rings, it's sort of an interesting aspect of signet rings providing identity. There weren't too many signet rings found from the 2nd century up into the Middle Ages, but in the Middle Ages they became very important, and they were again seen as an indication of rank and authority. So it started with the Pope wearing a signet ring and giving his cardinals rings, and then that filtered down to the knights and squires of the time, and it was soon seen, the signet ring was seen as an indication of nobility. Let's see, so it was right around the 16th century when a family crest started to be used and deeply carved into a more simple body of the metal. And it was deeply carved so that the text and the image, which was also carved in reverse, when pressed into wax or even some clay, could be correct and readable. Again, they used inexpensive stones, but one interesting thing, they find sometimes that religious themed signet rings were made using bloodstone, and bloodstone symbolized the blood of Christ dripping on the green grass below the cross. So people in the religious field often used bloodstone as their signet.
There were heraldic, from royalty, obviously, continuing, and there was a crest of the family crest, the royal crest.
Right.
But then it went into, and that was used when it pressed into a wax seal as a signature to sign important documents, and eventually. Then after the whole signing of important documents, I'm just speeding this up a little, giving a little bit of each time. But so they used it to sign important documents and to verify those documents were correct. And then it turned into signet rings of hobbies and different types of work that people did. Which was the next form of signet rings in intaglios or gold. And the intaglios then became more hard stone intaglios. They weren't using as much of the precious stones anymore, because they broke more often. And as we went on in time, they learned different techniques to make sure that they stayed, that when pressed into the wax seal, they were really going to hold up. After that, there was more motto kind of signet rings and rebus, which a rebus, if not everyone knows this, is a message and a imagery that forms a like puzzle of so what it means. So it could be in a different language, with with a saying, and then a flower, and it kind of says like forget me not. So the flower would be in the center, and then you'd have like something else that would represent the forget me not, a saying or something. So there were those rebus types. I mean, there's been so many types, and bloodstone also became popular again, because I think of the hard stones became really popular because of their sturdiness. So I think signet rings went through up until really Edwardian era, from what was it, 35,000 BC?
3,500 BC.
Yeah, 3,500 BC. Anyway, they went up until Edwardian era in like antique signet rings. Why have you added signet rings to your mix of jewelry, and why did you decide on shapes of the rings you choose?
Well, so a lot of my work is very sculptural and organic. And when I started enameling, that was sort of like I had to figure out how to make things that fit with my work, but I wanted to try to do them in the enameling, which lends itself to a flatter kind of, I don't know, presentation. So, so signet rings really made sense in that way, like I said before, because it is sort of a blank canvas. And that's kind of just how I started to think about them. And then as time went on, and actually, Beth, I even spoke to you about this because I was very hesitant to make them because there were so many signets in the world. And I was trying to figure out a way to funnel it through my own sort of aesthetic. And so I started with the shape. And, I think when we think of signets, we think of like a pretty strong, sort of very, very hefty kind of silhouette. And my work is kind of the opposite of that. It's very soft, it's very gentle, it's very swoopy. And so I tried to kind of find a way to make a signet ring that felt like my work, that it felt a little bit feminine, a little bit had like a light touch to it in a way. And, so a lot of my pieces, the shank is it sort of tapers very high up. So it's sort of very stem-like, and it kind of like merges into the flat face of the signet. And yeah, so it still has this kind of feminine feeling that works with my work, but it's a little bit more substantial, like a signet ring is.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask Emily the next question. You've had signet rings on the line from the start of your collection. Can you talk about why they were so important to you in the collection?
Yeah, so I've loved jewelry since I was a little kid, and I have these memories of looking at a signet ring and the large face, but then the graceful tapering that Gwen kind of talked about. And as a kid, I even remember liking the shape of them, although back then they were the domain of men, really. I didn't know women who wore them. And then when I started making jewelry, I just really wanted that feeling for women. I mean, signet rings feel very powerful and strong and confident. And I really wanted women to have a piece of jewelry that they could wear that made them feel those feelings. And I wanted to wear that too. Um, so that's kind of where I started. And then the first signets I released were my Zodiac collection. So, Diane hit on a lot of like the history of the motifs that were on Zodiacs. And it was a lot of, again, male based. So it's like a family crest, but it's the male family line. And so I really, with putting Zodiac signs on them, I felt like it was a more universal symbol that women could embrace and feel confident with. So, and since then, I just can't ever get away from the shape. I try to push myself to make other things, and I do, but it's just such a classic, elegant piece. And I feel like it really gives you the strength when you wear it. So that's kind of where I started with signets.
It is a very powerful ring because, especially when they have sayings or imagery that really speaks to you, whether they be old or new. Um, I love the language of flowers, so I love, and I also love intaglios that have meaning behind them, and I'm going to get to Kirsty's, which I love because they also have a lot of meaning, but they also have raised motifs, which are really cool. So, Kirsty, I want to talk to you because also you started out and you had signet rings on the line ever since you started out as well. So, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Emily about why they were so important. I think somebody in your family fits into this question, right?
I would say yes, but maybe not specifically as it relates to signets, but
Yeah.
absolutely signet. I mean, I feel like we all, at least Gwen and Emily and I, probably have a lot in common in terms of you have something inside of you for a very long time before it manifests into your own jewelry collection, possibly. But the signet, the flying pig signet, was definitely the cornerstone of my brand, and sort of like really stemmed from that. And I think that for me, signets, because it was the first piece, but it's really like a vessel, for the message of the messages that I wanted to convey, and it just felt very fitting to be on a signet. And I think, as Emily touched on it, it's a very, very powerful piece of jewelry. And I think that the messages that I've always wanted to convey are very powerful. There's a lot of self-empowerment. I think for me, a lot of my clients, it's a self-purchase, and very, it's very empowering. I have daughters, and a lot of the obviously the flying pig, the idea that anything is possible, is something that's very, very, very important. I feel very strongly, as a working mother, and just there's a lot happening in the world, and it's very important for me to convey these specific messages. So yes, the signets have been a part of it from the beginning, and they've definitely evolved. But being a cornerstone piece, I think a lot of times I come back to. We always come back. It's called the Fantasy Collection, but we always come back to that, and it's still, I would say, probably our most popular collection still to this day, going 8 years. So I hope that says something.
Yeah, no, it does. Was one of the first rings inspired by one of your grandfather's rings, or am I getting that wrong?
So we do have a ring called the grandfather signet. Um, I guess there's a little of irony, because my grandmother was much more of an inspiration for me, and just in starting the brand. She worked for a costume house, and so I really grew up in a lot of decoration, and really caught the bug from her. And I did inherit a lot of her jewelry, also a lot of costume jewelry, not a lot of fine jewelry, but I think it's a lot of the same ideas. And I do pull a lot of inspiration from men's jewelry. So not specific to my grandfather, but just kind of like that androgyny in general, like seeing an older gentleman with a powerful piece, and why shouldn't women wear the same jewelry? I guess that's it.
Very true, very true. And Diane, we're going to get back to you. And can we talk a little bit about those that seem to have the antique ones that seem to have a lot of meaning? Maybe you can mention a few popular ones that have meaning, and when and why they became popular.
Well, as has been discussed, the message on the signet rings is very powerful and gives inspiration. So, in my own experience, I had a seal. It was a boar's head carved in chalcedony that said in Latin, but when translated, it was "Fortune favors the bold or the daring," which I think is a wonderful, inspiring motto to have on your ring. I've had another one of an hourglass with the Latin "Tempus fugit," time flies, and also inspirational. But I did find some others online. Spiritus Gladius, and most of these are in Latin.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen too many in other languages. I'm sure they must be out there, but most of the ones that I've encountered have been Latin, and that translates to sword of the spirit. So yeah, the motto is very personal. It's an expression of something you want to keep with you day in and day out as you wear your signet ring.
Yeah, I'm like a hopeless romantic or a hopeful romantic, depending on how you look at it. But I have actually some Cupid. I've collected some Cupid ones, and they all have French sayings. Uh, you know, uh, if we part, meet again, with the scissors, like, showing that, the parting, but also Cupids, with the sayings of inseparable, and, just Cupid, chipping on ice and trying to get, uh, get the, I think, I forget what that one said, but it was like he was trying to get through to the person that he wanted to get under his spell or whatever. So, and also obviously there's Cupids in Latin and Cupids in Latin and Roman, and I mean Cupid, they're just called different things, different and different mythology behind them. But I tend to like the French sayings with them because they're very, very romantic. But anyway, so that's just my take on that part. But anyway,
I did once have as I'm thinking about it, a carnelian seal that had Arabic writing on it.
wow.
I can't read Arabic, so I don't know what it said, but it was a lot of writing, no picture, just writing.
Okay, so the next question is for Emily. And how can you talk a little bit about how the Signet collection evolved into your own intaglio designs, and what materials and colors they're in, and how they further exemplify your aesthetic? Is that too much? Is that a mouthful?
No, I can get through that. So one piece that was missing from my collection was, just like Diane was talking about, the intaglios with a stone in them. And or the signets, sorry, with an intaglio stone. I just loved those always. And it was many, many years of me trying to figure out how to execute that. I really wanted to use a stone engraver and do them in like bloodstone, like you've mentioned, or carnelian. But the price point for having someone hand engrave stones, like at that time, I was kind of moving from demi-fine into fine. And I just felt like it was too much for my customer. So I kept looking and trying to figure this out. I tried even laser engraving on a stone, which, was too faint and wasn't the right look. But eventually I was at the Tucson Gem Show, and in like the very corner of one of the big tents was this man from Italy, and he had all of these beautiful Venetian glass intaglios. And it was like somebody had opened a treasure chest and dumped it out on his table. My eyes just like lit up and I went, I found my guy. You know, none of the motifs he had were quite my aesthetic. They were like centaurs and sphinxes, which are cool, but just are not the right fit for me. So I asked if he could do custom work, and he said yes. And that started this great relationship where I would make like the metal piece, like a charm, and I would send it to Italy, and he makes a mold of it. And then it's a very similar process to metal casting, where the Venetian glass is heated up really hot. It's poured into the mold, then it's baked. And then he takes it out and he sort of hand finishes each piece. And then we get it back and set it in LA. And the price point was just a little bit better for my customers. And it's the most fun material to work with because you have all of these color options, from, you know, really pale pinks, neon greens, blues, purples. Black is very classic looking. I love using black. So it's been really fun to use it. It's definitely like an educational piece because people don't know what the material is and haven't seen it in jewelry before. They're maybe familiar with it as a vase. But I love working with it.
Maybe I should go to Gwen next and ask her the next question. Gwen, can you talk a little bit more about the concept of flowers and fruits and why you chose them as motifs in the vitreous glass enamel, and how you do this yourself, the process and the hidden designs on the inside for the work? Was that a mouthful, Gwen, or is it?
I got it. Well, you know, everyone has associations with flowers and fruits from life. It's kind of an unavoidable thing. And all these pieces, they're part of my collection it's called the Fiori collection, and it's about a specific flower for each piece. And so I want people to sort of have it like trigger a moment for them, you know, if like you have an association with the lily of the valley and you're wearing that ring, and it kind of just like triggers a memory, an emotion, a feeling. So that's kind of where I started to think of that. And of course, like historically, there's the language of flowers. So some people are very aware of what the specific meanings are for certain flowers. And I always think of like art history and, you know, what fruits might mean in a Dutch painting or something like that. So, you know, that's kind of where I start to think about which flowers I'll use and where I'll put them on the ring. You know, and then of course people just have their own really personal associations, and that I actually kind of love when they sort of override whatever the ring is sort of supposed to mean with whatever they like, you know, think of themselves or the person they think of when they see a certain flower. I always love that kind of feeling. And, you know, I do put a lot of details on the inside. I always have like on the signet rings, I always put a little enamel, you know, maybe the bud of the flower that's on the face or a leaf or something. And I leave a little room for engraving. And, you know, it's definitely an extra step for me in the process of making the piece. But I just love that it's this very personal piece. And then it has this extra layer of a little secret just for you. And then when the engraving, it makes it feel like that much more personal. So that's really why I do that, even though no one can really see it. But
and you've also come a long way from when I met you with the vitreous glass enamel. You've really kind of mastered it.
Yeah, I mean, you know, time and just doing it a lot over and over. I mean, I definitely, you know, I feel like there's a whole universe of things to learn about it, and I will hopefully keep exploring new parts of it. You know, it's like you have to sort of be very cautious in your steps forward with it because it's a really complicated process. But yeah, I have so many things I want to try to do because it's just this endlessly interesting way of making jewelry to me.
Yeah, it's really quite beautiful. Kirsty, we kind of went over that. You kind of answered this question before I asked it, but can Can you just talk about some of the motifs and meanings? I know you talked about the flying pig and why you chose that, but there are other ones. Like some, there, I think there's a lion that's one of my favorite because it is really, to me, represents strength. And so can you talk about some of the other meanings that you have?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I think that the idea with I'll just kind of like overall, whenever I'm creating a new motif for this collection, I'm always, thinking that I want it to transcend and be ageless. And I think that we all as humans, we come to the same crossroads over and over again, whether you're 20 or whether you're 70 and everything in between, where you need a message to carry you to the next chapter, or like to turn the page, or through a transition or transformation. And the lion, I would say, is definitely one of our more popular motifs. The Like Gwen, we do a lot of detailing, and I think about every aspect of the jewelry. So we engrave the inside with a message, that kind of words that to me really embody the character on the front of the signet. So the lion is engraved with fearless and extraordinary, which is, to me, like, feels so, whenever I meet a lot of clients, and I'm in a trunk show right now, but we get into these conversations, and at the end of it we're both in tears, because they're such powerful words, and it doesn't matter, we all see the same thing, but Gwen touched on this a little, we all take something different from it. And Gwen, you mentioned, like, when the customer's significance overrides maybe your intention. I think that happens a lot with mine as well, and I love that. I think that's what it's all about. So the lion says fearless and extraordinary, absolutely a symbol of strength, inner strength and leadership. And I think, well, I mean, we have 8 motifs to date. We will come out with another one soon, but there's really, there's no schedule to having new motifs. I think I would be fine if this was it. But we also have a unicorn, and the unicorn is kind of, I mean, I don't want to go through all of them because I know we have limited time, but maybe I'll just share some of the engravings. The unicorn is engraved with beautiful and mysterious. The owl, I would say, is another one of my favorites, which is engraved with see things differently. And for me, the owl is a very mystical creature. We don't always see owls, I think, and when you see one, you kind of like wonder why is this a chosen? Why am I like chosen to see an owl alive? But the idea that the owl has sort of a deep insight and intuition to see things in a way that others don't. So it's always very interesting to me to see what specific creature people gravitate toward. We also have a butterfly, and butterfly, I think, is obviously a metamorphosis, a transformation, self-development. The butterfly is engraved with spread your wings, and the swan is engraved with let your heart sing. And I think for me, the swan, I relate to a lot as a mother, because we put other people's hopes and dreams in front of our own a lot, and we prioritize helping others and always caring for others. But it's kind of the idea to really remember that what's inside of your own heart is just as important, and to find that. Also, we have, oh my gosh, I'm on the spot. We have a spider. The spider is about creation. Kind of, the spider, I think a lot of people look at it and think Halloween, or perhaps, creepy. I don't know that that's for me, but, as artists, we probably all can relate to creation, and, creating our own environment, and bringing people into that. What other motifs do we have? Now I'm on the spot and I'm blanking, but we run through several of them.
Yeah, and they're all really so wonderful. So I don't think you have to run through all of them,
Yeah,
but
I don't.
covered a lot of the really, really good ones. So my favorite one. So I think you've done a good job. Diane, I'm going to ask you a question next. You've amassed a lot of very cool signet rings in your collection over the years. Can you talk about how and why you choose the ones you do, and has the customer base grown over the years, and why?
So since I buy and sell used jewelry, antique jewelry, I want to make sure that the ring is not worn out. Signet rings were worn daily by many people, and sometimes the ones that come in are just too worn to be useful. So I look for ones that have an interesting design on the shoulders. Maybe the top is a pleasing shape. I want to make sure that the details are crisp and interesting as much as possible. I've had some that have an Egyptian revival motif on the shoulders. I own a lapis signet ring with an Art Nouveau naked lady on the shoulders, which is a favorite of mine. And actually, as we're talking, it came to me that I probably am an antique jewelry dealer because of the signet ring that my grandmother showed me when I was 9 or 10, and it had belonged to her grandmother, and it was made. The top was a heart, and you could still see um, the shape of that it was made. She told me it was made from a gold nugget from the 1849 gold rush, which I think I had just learned about that as a kid. So that was just so amazing to me that this thing dated back so long. So that one is, because it's a family item, I don't wear it very much because it is pretty worn. But it means a lot to me that it was in my family for generations.
That's amazing. I actually, when you talk about that, I actually bought one that was from the Gold Rush from you, in the shape of a shield, and it actually said something inside that let me know that it was from the Gold Rush. I forget exactly what it said, but maybe Gold Rush. No, it said something. And then there was some Art Nouveau there was one tulip with the little diamonds on the side that I
That's pretty.
yeah, and I kept and it had a blank front because a lot of them also were used as, right, weren't they used sometimes as what samples that people went around trying to sell before they were engraved, some of the signets later on that were gold.
Some people prefer not to have initials at all.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if the monogram is too obscure, sometimes you look at them and it's hard to determine what the monogram is. Sometimes I'll polish those out so that people can put their own initials in.
Yeah.
But a lot of times I leave the initials because they're interesting and the engraving is beautiful.
Yeah, the engraving sometimes so beautiful. But interestingly, I found because I'm Beth Bernstein, and I found 3 rings with BB that were signet rings, which was incredible to find 3. I found my niece, nephew, and my other nephew's initials in a signet ring all together, like scrolled together, which it was SRD, and it was like Sammy Dillon, Sammy Robert Dylan, and that was like a find for me, and it had forget-me-nots on the side. Like when you find that kind of thing, and my mom's name started with an S, and my niece's name starts with an S, so I buy signet rings that are really nice signet rings that's have an S engraved in them, and the S has to be really nicely engraved. So when you find those kinds of things, that's kind of like serendipitous, it's things that really, or if you find something that's so personal to you, which I have found, like like I tend to worry a lot. So, and there's, nil desperante, do not despair. So, so of course and that was in Bloodstone. Of course I purchased that one. So it's like everything becomes really personal with the antique and the modern ones, because I bought, I think, all of your modern ones, and they all mean something different to me. So it's really very cool. So I'm going to go on to my next question now, which will be for Emily. Can you also speak to why and how your customer base has become such a strong category, and what part of the business they are a percentage of, and what's the best selling pieces tend to be?
Yeah, so I think as far as why they resonated with my customers, I think part of it is timing. Back 17 years ago when I was starting, the whole craft fair aesthetic was happening. And like before that, jewelry was so traditional, like you would go to the mall and that was kind of your only choice. But then once, I was in New York and the craft fairs were happening and there was all this beautiful handmade jewelry that was unique, and I feel like women were starting to express their style with jewelry, and not just clothes and shoes. And so they were just like ready for this type of ring, I think. So I think it was partially timing. And then the bigger part is I think people just feel your love for the pieces. And I do a lot of talking about it on social media and newsletters, and talking about the history and why I love them and the meaning and the symbolism. And people are just looking for that in their lives, as we've all talked about in the last hour. Like we all need help throughout life, through various phases and stages. And I think that these rings are just, they have the rich history. They have so much going for them. I think that's why, they've resonated with my customers. As far as sales, like at this point, probably 50% of my ring sales are signets. If you go look on my website and you search under rings, probably like 75% of the rings I make are signet in some form. Maybe they're not the traditional like flat top, but they're going to have a taper where the front is, the face is bigger, and it's so it's kind of just, become one of the parts of my aesthetic, is this shape of ring.
Okay, that sounds great. Also, I remember I don't really like scorpions, even though I'm a Scorpio, and yours was one of my favorite Scorpios because it wasn't scary looking.
Oh, thank you.
I still wear that one regularly. So thank you for that, because usually they tend to like not be pretty. So
Yeah.
it was really well done. So anyway, and Gwen, will you continue to design more signets? I hope so. And will they be in keeping with the floral and fruit designs, or are you branching out? No, I think there's a pun intended. Motifs, and can you tell who you think your customer is?
Yeah, I will definitely keep making them, and I will probably do more flowers and leaves and fruits as well. But I can kind of see myself going in a bit of a more abstract direction with them too, like looking at patterns in nature and applying them to the signet shape. I have some ideas in the back of my brain for that right now. So, hopefully I will kind of keep making them and exploring, and also different silhouettes for them, and getting a little chunkier if I can, although price of gold, maybe not yet. And what was the other? Oh, my customer. I guess I think of my customer as like the person I'm designing for in my head. Is, you know, someone that is looking for a little poetry in life, you know, and that what everyone has talked about, that little bit of like just something that kind of like gives you a little extra strength, a little spark when you need it. You know, and definitely someone that wears jewelry really more for herself, like not so much for fashion, not so much for status, but like really just something that she personally connects with and feels like it says something about her, like to herself in a way, you know. It's like that's who I think of when I'm designing pieces.
Okay, thank you so much, Gwen, and I'm glad you're going to continue with the floral. I can't have enough of those. And Kirsty, how has the Signet ring collection fared over the past years, and would you consider? Well, you just talked about adding some more for the future, but like really adding some more for the future.
Yes, I think the answer is never. It's the door is never closed to opening new motifs, but I don't think of it in the sense of, you know, it like a seasonal thing where every season there has to be a new motif. It really, the motif comes when the inspiration strikes, and you know, to maybe some of our retail partners' dismay, it's not always on a seasonal calendar. So I think, you know, it's probably been 2 years maybe since we've released a new Signet motif. But you know, they are definitely the cornerstone of the brand, and so we continue to work through the same motifs in different iterations. We've done some hand carving in stone, and we've also done some different styles of 3D engraving, obviously our signature, and then we also do an intaglio style with more of a flat surface, and the engraving is the motif is carved in our alchemy collection. So, you know, the signets that we talked about are I would say like our fantasy collection is definitely what people would associate with the brand, but I do consider some of our other collections very much in the Signet style, alchemy, even, you know, lollipop. While it's a cocktail ring with a lot of color, it still has, you know, the base and language of a Signet to me. And so I try and carry that through all of the different parts of Retrivai. Did that answer the question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. But yes, we do have a new motif coming of the fantasy.
Oh, good. So my question for all of you, I guess, is: do you feel that this is really a self-purchase by, and you can just answer with a yes or no, but like more of a self-purchase buy, from the woman buys it for herself rather than the man coming in and buying her a gift? I mean, obviously there are gifts involved, but what do you feel is more prevalent? I would say, just go around. Diane, you go first.
I think most Signet sales that I have are self purchases, but I do have a customer who gives a signet ring to each of his sons when they turn 18. And the signet ring is engraved with their initials. So I think that's just a lovely tradition. Girls get a strand of pearls, so they're not left out, but the boys get the signet ring. So I've sourced a number of signet rings for him. He has a big family.
Wow. And Gwen, so you think more self-purchase?
Yeah, for me so far, it's been mostly self-purchase, but a lot of men buying for women though too.
Okay.
Actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, not a good answer.
I know it's like split.
Oh, me? Okay. Yes, absolutely, 100% self-purchase. I think like what it's you know, the connection when you see something, and it is very much a self-purchase for us.
And Emily.
Yes, same self-purchase, although I have done a bunch of custom projects for families who wanted signets for every member of the family, but like non-custom is definitely a self-purchase.
Okay. And also, I want to know the signet ring that all of you wear. And do you wear a signet ring? And what's the one that you wear most often? Because I know as jewelry people, we change our jewelry a little bit more often than other people. Diane, we'll start with you.
Well, I mentioned the lapis.
Yeah.
I have also had a silver signet ring with an R that I wore, and a gold pinky antique ring that had an R in it.
Okay. Gwen, that's for your last name, Richardson, right?
Yes.
Okay. Gwen.
I wear my Lily of the Valley signet ring on my pinky a lot, and I just made a ginkgo, which might take over because both of those have very personal meaning for me. So I like them.
Okay, great. And Kirsty?
I would say I'm wearing the butterfly, so I'm going to have to say that. And yeah, I mean, again, it's very personal. So for a number of reasons, while I do rotate them out, I would say I've been wearing the butterfly on my pinky for at least a year now. So that is what I'll go with.
Emily?
So I have my Taurus, which is my daughter's sign, and that never comes off, and I'll give it to her someday, and it will be imbued with all the experiences and emotions I've felt while wearing it.
Okay, that sounds great. So I wear a BB on my pinky, and I also have a BB that is engraved. I actually had it engraved in an agate, Georgian agate signet ring that is really cool. But I think the one that's an intaglio that I wear the most, that's antique. Like I'm just talking about the antique ones now, because I do wear one of all of yours. But the antique one that I wear the most is one that says "Nil desperante," which means "do not despair," because I really need to know that. And I also tend to change with the feelings that I have. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, so if I'm feeling like I want some romantic love, I wear a Cupid, carnelian intaglio. So it kind of changes with the feelings. And because I'm superstitious, so I feel like if I'm going to wear the ring, it's going to happen. But that's just my thing. But anyway, do any of you have anything else you want to say about signets? Just in general that I haven't asked you. Diane, I'll start with you.
Well, I guess the one thing that I was thinking about was traditionally people wore a signet on their pinky finger and of their non-dominant hand, because that way they didn't have to remove it to make the impression into the clay or the wax.
Right.
And I happened, as I was doing research for this, I happened on a photograph of King Charles wearing a pinky ring on his left hand, and it was the Prince of Wales ring. But I did read that he has since gifted it and passed it on to his son, William, Prince William, who is the new Prince of Wales once he became king. So I thought that was, I don't know, an interesting illustration of how signet rings can be meaningfully passed down from generation to generation. And like you said, Emily, imbued with so much emotion and history. I think that's a lovely aspect of signet rings.
And anybody else? Gwen, do you have anything to add?
Not really. One thing I love about signet rings is that I actually think no matter what your jewelry style is, you could kind of work them in. Like I actually tend to be pretty minimal. Like I don't wear tons of pieces at a time. And I think like there's nothing cooler than just like one signet ring on my pinky. Like I just love the way that looks. But I also think that someone who wears a ring on every finger, like it works with that look as well. And that's kind of a cool thing about them.
Kirsty?
I was thinking kind of the exact same thing, Gwen. It's just it is very interesting, and it doesn't really, men, women, old, young. It's kind of like if you were to ask me what's the one piece that is just kind of like a universal piece of jewelry, like it's always my answer. And so I feel the same way. I've very much enjoyed hearing from everyone here. It's I feel like we could talk about signet rings, for much longer than an hour. So I've really enjoyed this. I hope everyone else has.
Yeah, definitely. So, Em, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I mean, just I think that again, they're also like a universal piece in the sense of this is why we all make jewelry because it has this meaning and this importance, and I think it can all be like summed up into this one piece of jewelry, This is why we do this. That's at least why I do it, and I think I'm hearing that also from Gwen and Kirsty and Diane.
So so it's interesting to me because also, if you were part of a clan, some sort of clan, like royal family, like not clan, but like royal family or, certain hobbyists and things like that, you'd wear signet rings. And then at some point in time, the mob was like really associated with signet rings. And I'm glad that like now women wear them and it's not just, about like, because in all the movies that we watch, like from everything from Goodfellas to Casino to all the movies we watch about mobsters and also The Sopranos, of course, they were all wearing signet rings. So I think that was like an interesting departure from like always like I grew up like I actually grew up in a town where there were real mobsters and their fathers all wore signet rings on their pinky, so it was like that's what I grew up, but I still love them. I love seeing them on the pinky and it was just really cool. But there's also another thing. Brad Pitt wears a signet ring all the time and I can't make it out because it's never been shown in a close-up, but I see that he wears it to every like event, and I've always been trying to figure out what the signet ring shows. So if anybody ever figures it out, you can. But it's been great having all of you here and talking about one of my favorite subjects, because I wear a lot of different rings, but signet rings are actually one of my favorites because as some of you said, you can wear it on the pinky. It looks great with nothing else. You can wear it with multiple rings. It really goes with any style. It goes with any kind of fashion. It's just, and I love both antique and modern. I mean, it's really a wonderful ring to have in somebody's collection. So I think we can end it there. What do you guys think?
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you. Oh, thank you guys so much for, coming and doing this and, giving your views. And you're also talented. Dan's like an amazing dealer who I've interviewed for many articles, and all of you have been interviewed for signet ring articles and other articles. And Kirsty's in my new book. The Julie Shining Stars, 45 Women, Visionary Women Designers. And also I did a book on modern, elegant guide to modern jewelry, and I did a whole section, of course, on signet rings. So anyway, I've been, writing about them and wearing them, and it's just a really, really fun topic for me. So I hope you guys had fun. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Beth.
Thank you.
Thank you.